You start. It's your show.
Good day, welcome everyone to another episode of From the Minister's Chair to the Friday, February 7th. And today we're going to have a slightly different format. I'll be interviewed by the author of Discover Montserrat Missionary, so editor of Discover Montserrat Missionary, so Golden. So she's going to be asking me some questions and I will try my best to answer them. Because this way, instead of me speaking, maybe there are things I didn't think about, or maybe I could get asked questions from a different perspective. So in that way I could broaden what you hear, what the public hears, to get a better idea of what's going on in the country, what's going on in this ministry. So that's one of the reasons why I went down this road.
Okay. Thank you for having me, Minister Joseph. Good afternoon, everyone. Just last night, your ministry hosted the OECS Music Talk. And one of the things that you said in that session was that you see it possible for Montserrat to actually lead in the orange economy. First of all, explain what the orange economy is and why you think Montserrat has a shot at being a part of that economy.
The orange economy is basically the economies that consist of music, culture, basically creative arts, audiovisual, photography, software, and things like that. That's grouped as the orange economy. There's also something which I talk about another time, the blue-green economy. But we have realized that the world is changing. And one of the mistakes that the OECS, the Caribbean, CARICOM, and Montserrat has made, that we keep waiting for something to happen and then we try to catch up. And one of the ways that the world is changing, and that the world's economies have now moved into a digital economy. They have now moved into an economy where things are dependent upon services, not really manufacturing and goods, but there's a huge portion that is now part of services and part of the creative industries. If you look at the Caribbean and what we can compete on, you have to ask yourself, can we compete on manufacturing with China and Vietnam? What is it that we have that's unique? And one of the things that we have that's unique is our culture, is our music, is our way of expression. And there are people out there who are interested in that. Some of them get to see it when they come as tourists. But there's also a model where we can package that. We can package our music, we can package our masquerade, we can package our arts, and we can sell that. And that does require great infrastructure of multi-million-dollar ports and multi-million-dollar airports and multi-million-dollar factory sheds, etc. It's really an investment in people, an investment in education, an investment in structures and help for people who are going down that road. And because of our limited size and our limited financial resources available to us, when I try to think about what is it that Montserrat can do to actually compete with the rest of the world, and if everybody follow me and believe what I'm saying it is one of the things that we can do is compete in terms of our culture, our art, because it just involves people and make sure that those people are trained properly. So I think if we get that done, Montserrat has a chance of growing that part of its economy and generating some money for us and for our people.
Okay. One of the things that struck me last night in the differences in the presentations that were made was that by the time we got to the last one, I almost felt as if we were too far behind because we still had a challenge where a lot of our artists aren't at a level where they're treating their work as a business. And here we are in a situation where all of the investment in streaming and social media and things, we were being told that there's money in it, but not as much because we don't have the population, even the market for that. And they were looking at, what was it? Not Bitcoin. Blockchain as a method of us being able to monetize it better. Do you think, what do we need to do to get from this idea to actually seeing a manifestation of this with technology as a foundation for that?
Things like this program that the ministry has put on has to start. So it has to start from your leadership positions. So it has to start from us. And from my ministry that's mandated to do a countrywide ICT policy. You have to start sending that message out there that technology is there invented for people to use. We have a habit of having technology and trying to figure out what it is for. You have a problem and you're trying to solve the problem, that's why technology was invented. And we have to stop seeing technology as something nerdy or geeky or something from engineering. It is mankind coming up with tools to try to help them. So when we think about our market, and we say, okay, it's 5,000 people in Montserrat, it's a couple 100,000 people in the OECS, we try to market our software and our music to that, it's limited. But what technology has done is has opened us to the world. It has opened us to the US market, to the American market, China, all these fancy places. It has opened up those markets. We have to start teaching the population something I know you have done and something I've been doing and has to keep doing now as a government. That you have to look at the things that we're doing and try to see them not only as a hobby, but as a business. So we love to have this conversation, or we're doing it as a side hustle, or we're doing it as a hustle, or we have a main job and this is the side job. You have to start seeing, why am I doing art? Why am I doing music? Why am I doing songwriting? Why am I taking pictures? If it's a hobby, that's fine. But if you're looking at to doing it as a business, you have to start thinking as how you would do it as a business. And from our end as government, if you're teaching music in school and ICT in school, it can't only be the music theory about scales and how to program. There has to be an aspect that said, how does the music business work? How does the computer and the software business work? So that you have an integrated model that we're not only doing these things because we love them, which is a fine reason for doing it, but because there's also an economic and monetary part to do it. So it's basically about messaging, to keep telling people this can be done, and to also show success. Okay, so when I'm going to talk about you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, but unless somebody sees, or young people or anybody sees that somebody did it and was successful at it, and successful in terms of that they are able to pay their mortgage, send their children to school, and have a good enough lifestyle, it's going to be hard to convince others to do it. So we're going to need role models and people that actually did that, whether in music, software, the creative industry type things, and succeed. And use a model. See, Miss Nerissa, she has done it. She has been able to live this lifestyle before that. You can do it too. So it's a lot of work, and we are way behind. But we can't give up and say because it's hard, we won't do it. People have done difficult things and succeeded, and we have to tell ourselves we can do it also.
Okay, so you have stayed consistent in that this has been your message long before you were even in government. So are you having this conversation with, say, the Minister of Education and the other areas, that with the recognition that we actually, if this is a potential growth area for Montserrat, that we have to invest in it? Last night we were definitely encouraged that governments need to put money behind the creative industry if we actually want to see success. What's the conversation that you're having with your colleagues about investing in culture?
Well, you're helping me do it. But the beginning, as you said, since I've come on, so that has been my message.
Yeah.
From the very, very beginning. The first St. Patrick's lecture I did was exactly with this message. I've never, ever changed. I've always had this message going through. The good thing about it, if you listen to when I was in the opposition with the then opposition leader, who is now the current premier, the Honorable Easton Taylor Farrell, he also preaches the same message. The same message about economic development, how are we going to do it, the different methods of doing it, the need to come off of British aid and generate our own money. So in principle, there's an agreement by the premier and the government that we have to start thinking along that line. And if we look at the programs that we are going to bring forward in our budget as related to ICT and the way how we started, I moved a lot of what the training that's been done so far, the e-commerce training, now the music training. How do you use your creative stuff with the technology to get things done? So there are conversations within the ministers about how can we integrate ICT technologies or creative aspect into getting things done. And if not to get political, but if we look at our manifesto, one of the things that it specifically says is that we're going to do a Youth Innovation Award. So if young people come up with new ideas, there'll be funding available, awards, grants to get those ideas done. So before the election and after the election, that's a core principle that we have. Innovation, innovative ideas, creative ideas, things in the creative industry. We can't only be funding buildings and roads and physical things. There's also mental and creative aspects of development that have monetary value and economic value, that also must be funded. So there's a commitment for that.
Okay. So can I ask how soon are we going to see this innovation award? Is there something that's coming in this year?
Budget is in March.
All right. Okay. So we could look to see what we hear on that.
That's the best answer to give.
Yeah. All right. Now, if we switch to the green economy, which is still in your area of work, what's happening with green energy, the green energy projects under MCWL?
We have this 750 kilowatt solar project that's still on track to be completed for the airport. But on a bigger aspect, one of the first things I did when I came to this ministry, if you look at our energy policy and energy plan, there's a plan that says by 2030 we should be, I think, 70-80% green. I basically told the Director of Energy and the PS and those other people involved, the plan is in 3 years we're going to do it. So I've compressed it from wherever the subtraction is, a 10-year plan into a 3-year plan. Once that is small enough, the things that take other countries a long time should not take us that long. So I do have a goal that in 3 years, all energy generated through our grid, it won't be 100% because there's backup things that has to be done, but the energy generated in our grid has to be from some green energy source. So we're currently working through all the different options, whether it be solar, wind, geothermal, to see which is the most effective. How would the financing work? Because we've been told multiple times from DFID that you need to seek public-private partnership. They're not grant funding these kind of things. So we're currently looking at financing options, cost options, to eventually at some time this year to go out and to say this is our goal, get back the responses, and then make a choice from that. And I do sincerely believe, and it's one of my main agenda items, that in 3 years we must be able to say we are generating all our power from the grid through green energy. We're also simultaneously doing the pilot project on the electric car to compare the cost per mile of running as opposed to the internal combustion engine cars. When those numbers come back, the policy directive is going to be all new government vehicles, starting from MCWL, has to be generated through green energy sources. We're also looking at changing out all these lights that we have, etc. Because we're now doing the street lights, but it's also going to now move on to the government lights, must switch to LED sources, etc. So there is a plan that at the end of 5 years, we should be a model island, a model nation to the rest of the world to say that this is what Montserrat did, and let people talk about how Montserrat did it and how it can be done, how we can build a sustainable world, how can we build a world where we are in control of our own energy production and not dependent on what's going on in Iran or Iraq or these places, but we are generating our own energy sources. That is one of the main agenda items under this ministry, to get that accomplished, and I believe it can be done.
Okay. So if we're going to be switching over to green energy, we now have a challenge with fossil fuels and the local business that brings in our fossil fuel. What then is going to be the alternative for them in terms of revenue generation? Does that mean we're going to lose them if we no longer need them? How do you see that working?
I've asked for discussions with the Delta manager to discuss such things. I've had preliminary discussion with members of finance to discuss the financial implications of such things. So those papers, as I said, it's in a preliminary stage. Those papers haven't been completed as yet, but all these things can be worked out, and they will be worked out. But they have been thought of, because we do understand if you take away diesel coming in, it will have an effect on other things. But the way how we have to look at it is that businesses change and businesses remodel. If you now have electric cars, they have to be charged and serviced other places. There are other business models that come up. And to argue that I've invented electricity, but because we have people who are rearing horses, no, because we have people who are making candles, that the country should not start electrifying and putting lights in the roof. It's not really, you cannot make that argument. Mm-hmm. The world is going into that direction. If you listen to not the premier, the leader of England,
Prime Minister.
the Prime Minister. You listen to the Prime Minister Johnson of England, he specifically says in a certain number of years, and they've given the timeline, they will not be allowed to manufacture fossil fuel cars. There's a hard deadline on it. So all cars coming out of that will have those standards. America had it, the last administration had, the current American administration relaxed some of these rules. But the moment that administration changes, the rules are going to come back. That the Chevys and these other car companies, they will have mandates that they must move away from internal combustion engine. And if you're going to sit back in the Caribbean and in Montserrat and wait for that to happen, to try to get our infrastructure up to date, to take advantage of it, we are making the mistake that we're continuously making. We know it's coming. Prepare for it before it comes. We model your economy before it comes. We model your businesses before it comes, so that when it comes, you're a leader in that field and not trying to play catch up. And we need to stop in Montserrat and in the Caribbean playing catch up to world trends when we already know that you've been signaled strongly that this is where it's going. Get there before the train gets there.
Okay. We mentioned earlier that software development is also part of the creative industry. I know this is a particular sweet spot for you. What are some of the things that you want to see happen for Montserrat in terms of where that is concerned as a potential money earner for us? And where are young people in terms of preparation to do those kinds of ventures?
There are plenty aspects to that. One of them is that the ecosystem and the infrastructure, the legal infrastructure, has to be in place. That is currently being looked at in terms of our copyright laws, cybercrime laws, electronic transaction of fees, laws and amendments that need to be done. Those are in the pipeline, and they should basically be done within 2 to 3 years, so that you have the legal framework is there to get that accomplished. There are companies here who are currently, some startups, some new companies, who are currently in software development. So it's a matter of working with them, seeing how government can facilitate their ideas, etc. There are young people in the schools. For example, Fourth Dimension has been working a lot with the young people in school who wants to go along that direction. It's the same kind of mentorship, showing what's possible, making sure that those programs continue with the young people to get them interested, to show how that could be done. We also have to get in a situation, if we have our laws and everything set up, how do you get other companies, even though they don't physically come here, because the way our laws and environment is set up, how do you get them to register here? How do you get traveling programmers and traveling freelancers who normally go to Chile and Thailand and these other places with their laptop, to, instead of going to those places, come to Montserrat? So after we get fiber and all that set up, we now have to start thinking about attracting those software journalists, writers, who don't really dependent upon an office to get their work done. How do you have to modify your tax laws, your residency laws, to accommodate that kind of industry. The other major one is, again, the world is changing. We talk about blockchain, not to get into technical details, but that's a technology that's fast taking over the background of how a lot of financial stuff is done, procurement, voting, that. You have tied to that as something called fintech, with a financial technology companies. Those companies are disrupting how traditional banks, insurance companies, etc. work. Because they're disrupting it, they have a lot of problems registering in maybe some of these normal domains. We're going to have to look at changing our laws to accommodate them registering in Montserrat with the proper regulatory framework, and that's a source of revenue that can be collected. Gibraltar, Anguilla, and some other countries have already done that, and we are behind. So that's something that's going to come back on my agenda, on this government's agenda. How do you put those laws in place to get those companies to register here? How do you get, now that Brexit is happening, How do you get some of the British financial technical companies to outsource some of their back office stuff to Montserrat? How do you get some of the startups who do not want to go through some of the strict rules that maybe London have to come to the Montserrat and do their startup business here, use Montserrat as a model of how they can get their product to work? So when we do set up, which as the Premier has already discussed, the UK office with a trade officer there, one of his duties has to be getting those type of businesses and companies and people to come Montserrat and set up.
Okay, all right. You've said that within 5 years you'd love for Montserrat to be a model nation of all of these things, and you've also identified several key areas that we have to work swiftly at. And we know for a lot of people where change is not something that we want to do or prefer to do. What are the things that are happening now that, because I might hear this and think, oh yeah, but that's 5 years down the road before I'm making any money. I need money in my pocket now. What are some of the things happening that in your ministry or across the government that says we are going to be putting money into helping people be able to put money in their pockets now?
Not sure how to answer that, but we have various projects occurring at the present time. We are widening Cavalier Hill Roads, which employs people. We have our normal road cleaning that employs people. The Mars Hill Road will soon commence, which will employ people. Parts of the port works in terms of transportation internally will be starting this year, which will employ people. The hospital design contract has been signed. After we get back the 3 designs and we have chosen one, then the procurement will go out now for the actual build, which will be a huge project, which will be employing people. When the fiber lands into Montserrat at Buncombe Bay, it needs to get to this side of the island. Part of the ducting at the side of the road is done, but parts are missing. Funding is available for that, so that will be done, which will again be employing people. So in terms of what this ministry is doing right now to make sure those projects, some were stalled for a while, and we have basically we have prioritized what we want to do and said this is what needs to happen. The steering committee made the decisions. We have worked with the PMO, and the majority of those projects are now in a state that either they are now tendered or design contracts are out or the works have already started. So by the end of this year, a lot of construction type activity and its associated things will be taking place. And I'm not even sure we have fully the labor capacity internally to take advantage of it. And I know with trade, we're having discussions about retrofitting the Mon Tobacco building and another building at the side over there to make it a business center type thing. So people who are doing small industry manufacturing can come for help, can get their space to set up their business, do their manufacturing, and in association with agriculture and trade, because the offices have been keep moving, and in terms of marketing and creating labels and things like that. And as I said, we have discussed, and the Premier has already discussed it, setting up a trade officer in the UK. And part of the duties is going to be to find markets for these monstration products that come out of our island to sell there. Those that will be in place this year. The building should be renovated. All that it should happen. There's some issues, but all that should happen this year.
So so those issues are going to be cleared up?
These issues are going to be cleared up. The basic, in a general sense, the basic issue is that the building is currently occupied by what was once Mon Tobacco.
Okay.
We know that that business is being wound up.
Okay.
So we have to wait for the winding up of the business, not get back access, but let the business get wind up properly, let legal people do their job. Then we can go in and renovate and get that done. But that will be done this year.
Okay. So for those of us who are not into constructions or things like that, what might be happening in your labor office that could provide other support in terms of access to training, to retrain people who might be looking for work, or young people who are out of school right now?
One of the first programs that's happening and should be happening the end of February, early March, is a welding program. So people that comes out and want to do welding, that will take place. The other set of programs, I must say, at this time, they're not fully finalized because we budget is in March, and we have to get a common theme and a common understanding about, because remember the budget has to be signed off in by DFID. It is foolhardy to commit yourself fully to some of the things that were proposed for the new spends and for the new money before you have an answer back from them to say this is approved.
Okay.
So I'm not going to say that this is going to happen. You could say, well, I want to happen. There's certain proposals put forward, for example, digitizing government records is a problem. They're all on paper. And there has to be proposals being put forward to try to start to digitize them, which will require the employment of young people and that kind of skill set to get that done. Whether those funds are approved, we have to await the decision from the UK. So those kinds of programs.
Is that going to be a cross-government project though when it comes on board? Because almost every
It has to be done in
government
phases.
has a issue with archiving and digitizing.
It will be done in phases with not certain ministries will be chosen for which it's done. And then you try to, over the 5 years, get it done over the 5, unless you get a project funding from, but the EU is going to be difficult. Unless you get project funding for across government, it has to be done in phases.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up now in a little bit, but you skipped over when we were talking about green energy, geothermal. Is that project dead?
The project is not dead. One of the things I've done, and did it this week, because there's a lot of talk about, for example, exporting geothermal to Antigua and to the neighbor states, but that's talk. What's the actual numbers? So actually this week there were discussions that happened with the energy director and his team, and to try to say, let us come up with an actual cost of taking the power there. What would it actually cost to put down a cable and to maintain a cable? What kind of amount of power would you have to transmit over that cable to make it even viable to consider that in terms of the plant that has to be here? Because right now we only have 2 wells, 2 to maybe 3 to 5 megawatts. If you had to drill new wells to increase that to 10 or to 15 or to 20 to make such a project, what would that cost? What would the laying of the cable cost? That report hasn't come back. It is possibly comes back that it's just not financially feasible to transmit power. Even though it's a good idea, it might come out that it's not. So it's not dead. So we're looking at those numbers to see what would it actually take to do that. And we have also compared numbers. We currently know what we pay for fuel. What would it take to build a plant? Assume you don't get grant funding. All this assume you don't get grant funding. What would it take to build a plant, maintain a plant? We know our population currently, it's going to change, and we know our fuel use and our power use currently. So you could calculate how much money you could actually get. Can you actually recover back your investment? So that is done. But if you get grant funding, which is still going to be asked for, or if we get an investor who decides that he has another use for it, in other words, he has a factory he wants to build, or he has something that requires power, and he's willing to come to some agreement with the government in drilling and setting up his plant, then it's a viable project. But we will need to see the numbers from that study that we're trying to conduct currently. And what we're also going to do is, in general, we're going to put out how to put it? We're going to put out a general thing to say Montauk wants to go green. These are what we have in geothermal. These are the wind studies. Basically, the solar conditions in the Caribbean. You choose one, and to say which one you think can be done, we'll look at all the proposals, and then we'll choose that is the direction we're going to go. Let the people actually do it. So we can do this with solar and battery, we can do this with wind, we can do this with geothermal. This is what we're asking for. This is how the cost to generate electricity is. This is how long we can be able to do it, and then we look at all those proposals and choose the one that we think is of best benefit to Montserrat.
Okay. I'm a bit surprised that you're saying that you still have to do studies. When I thought up until this point we had that sort of data.
Not studies on the capacity, studies. What's the cost? We say you hear it all the time. We're going to ship power to Antigua. What's the cost of doing that? Nobody has ever said.
Okay.
Like things like that, nobody has actually ever done that. Have you spoken to the Antigua government to ask are they willing to take power from Montserrat? Have you spoken to investors in Antigua who may want power? Who this is always done in an abstract way. But if I ask you, has that been done? And the answer is no, it has never been done. It's just talking about doing it. So what we're trying to do now is to say, get away from the talking. If you're going to ship power to Antigua, who would want it? What deals would you have to make? What would it cost to lay the cable? That normally you might say that you're waiting on an investor to tell you. But if you know upfront that it cannot be done, we have limited resources and limited capacity, it would be best to now transfer that to someplace else instead of going on a road that you know in the end is going to be a dead end. It's not like we have this huge staff or this huge complement of workers and monetary resources to be doing things. So if it comes out that it is just too expensive to do that, then you move on to the other options and see how that can be done.
Okay. Last question. A couple of weeks ago, you mentioned that you just returned, I think, from Jamaica, and you mentioned some labor issues that you were going to be that there was going to be a relook at our labor laws. Are there any discussions happening around those issues?
There was a meeting in Labour Commission to discuss some of the aspects of the labour laws. It wasn't a very detailed discussion, but there are things that needs to be regularized in our labor laws. How are we proceeding? How do you apply for work permits? Who gets work permits? What are the conditions of that? Those are already in the laws per se, but they're not regularized.
Regularized or enforced? What
Enforced.
Explain. Enforced. Okay. All right.
Because you must remember, the labor code as stands is about 5 years old. It's a big document. And it requires certain things to be put in place and certain monitoring to be done and certain forms to be filled out that weren't there before. All of that is not in place. And if we have those laws on our books and we're not willing to change them and we say that these are good laws, we have to start putting the operational things in place to get those laws to function as they are.
So is it that you don't have the staff?
That will come up in the discussions.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Minister, for speaking to me this afternoon. And I hope we have an opportunity another time to do that, to catch up later in the year.
Thank you for that, and thanks everyone for listening, and I hope it was informative. Have a good weekend all.